Arcanum 4, the Prince. Arcanum 4 pictures a man sitting cross-legged on a cube, with a cat crouching on the front side. He wears an iron casque on his head, above which shine 14 stars. In his right hand he holds a wand, pointing it toward heaven. With his left hand he points toward earth. A hawk or eagle covers his solar plexus. From the leathern girdle around his waist hangs a triangular apron, with 2 ruffles on each side. A rectangle inscribed with the word MU weights down this apron. Symbolism and Philosophy. Some versions of the tarot called the man in this arcanum the dictator, others the emperor. We prefer the title the prince. As the Christic man-child of our divine soul, seared by the heavenly king, he is logically a prince, not a king or emperor. In his right hand he holds the wand pointing toward the realm of light, as in Arcanum 1. In this case, it is the rod of iron that rules the nations. Power-hungry men try to rule the nations with force and might. They exemplify the spirit of dictatorship lying deep within every man. Even if we don't hold positions of power and authority that enable us to rule nations by force, all of us, in one form or another, try to rule our own little world with an iron hand, either openly or more subtle. The iron casque on the prince's head supplements and emphasizes the symbolism of the rod of iron. It indicates that until the Christ is born in us, our thinking processes habitually make us try to dominate others. When our sleeping spirit is finally awakened, however, we begin to exercise self-discipline instead of ordering everyone else's life. That is the true meaning of the word nations. It is the nations of our own thoughts and emotions we must learn to shepherd by means of disciplined desires resulting from a strengthened will. This is the real meaning of the rod of iron. With his left hand, the prince coincides his self-willed desires to the oblivion of forgetfulness. The hawk or eagle on his solar plexus symbolizes his soaring to the highest emotional expression under the leading of God's Spirit. The triangular apron, adorned with 4 ruffles and weighted down with a rectangle inscribed with the word MU, appears over the generative organs. It brings the prodigal face to face with one of the stumbling blocks that stand in his way as he walks the royal road, that of sex. Sex is looked on as sinful by many because so much of man's woe stems from its abuse and misuse. But the root of sin lies much deeper than the branches we see on the tree of generation. It lies far behind the scenes of life, expressed mainly as proud self-will that caused the prodigal spirit to leave his father's house and to trespass into a world where he thinks he can be independent of God. He ignored the warning, "In the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die." The great problem resides not so much in fulfilling the natural demands of the body, but in disregarding its limited power. Every violation of nature brings about a reaction according to natural law that seems like a curse to the flesh. This is one of the major engagements in the real inner battle of Armageddon. The problem is to reconcile spirit and flesh. This process is symbolized by the 14 stars above the prince's head, calling attention to regeneration, one of the key words of Arcanum 14. Generation seats man on the cube of matter. In this world, having lost his spiritual control, he must make the best of life as he finds it. The prince's legs, resting in the form of a cross, tell him how it must be done. He has to crucify the peace-destroying drives of his self-willed nature on the cross of self-sacrifice. Only in this way can he regain access to the lost heavenly continent mu, where he formerly enjoyed complete at one-ment with God. When the great work of redemption proceeds far enough, the prodigal becomes like the cat on the cube. A cat is supposed to have 9 lives, a symbol of immortality. This number calls attention to Arcanum 9, the sage who walks the upper heights of the royal road on his way to re-enter the New Jerusalem, God consciousness. Like the cat, who has phenomenal powers of vision in the dark, the prodigal learns to see through the darkness of his self-centered world with an inner spiritual eye. He sees that his essential being is immortal, that it can never die. Astrology. Arcanum 4 corresponds to the sign Scorpio, ruled by the planet Mars. It indicates sex, birth and death, inheritance, and legacies. Human anatomy. Arcanum 4 indicates the organs of reproduction and elimination, particularly the large colon, also the sperm, ova, and mother's milk. Masonic ritual. Arcanum 4 corresponds to the marked master's degree, the key to which is found in the words, "To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saying, he that receiveth it." Revelations chapter 2, verse 17. The symbol of the new name is expressed in the 8 Masonic letters, H, T, W, S, S, T, K, S, supposed to mean Hiram, Tyron, widow's son, sent to King Solomon, or more inwardly, he that was slain soars to kindred spirit. When self-will dies in the candidate, he returns under the guidance of the Holy Spirit to a glad acceptance of God's will. He finds a new joy in the renunciation of his own folly. The Bible. Genesis chapter 32, verses 24 through 32, tells the message of Arcanum 4 in the allegory of Jacob's wrestling with a man or God through the darkness of the night until the break of day. A close examination of the text says he wrestled with a divine messenger who touched the hollow of his thigh, or more correctly, the hollow next to the thigh. This is phallic symbolism and refers to the sign Scorpio. In star maps, Scorpio is pictured by a scorpion, member of the serpent family. In symbolism, scorpions, serpents, crocodiles, and alligators represent man's self-centered nature, his drive to take the Creator's place through procreation. What Jacob actually wrestled with, therefore, was the scorpion or serpent of self-will in his own being. This goes much deeper than sexuality, so prominently associated with the sign Scorpio. If you will refer to page 56, you will see that the key word of Scorpio is desire. The name Jacob means supplanter. As a type of every human spirit before the rebirth, he typifies the natural instinct of the blind fool to supplant God's will with human desire. Because his spiritual vision is eclipsed, the blind fool stumbles along in darkness. As Jacob wrestled with his own desire nature all through the night until the breaking of the day, so too must every prodigal son wrestle. He must wrestle through the night of his entire life, if need be, until he wins the victory and receives a new name, Israel, meaning a prince who rules with God. With God's help, by means of a disciplined will, he gradually overcomes the power of the serpent of self-will. The new power in his life brings about a gradual shrinking in the hollow of his thigh. When he realizes the vast gulf that separates him from God, it makes him mad, then sad, then glad. First, he wants to kill the serpent of self-will. Then he feels sorry for himself that the slithering old snake wound its coils around him. Then he rejoices in the discovery that by relying on the Spirit of God, he receives power not only to wrestle with the serpent, but to prevail over it and make it bless him. Note in the allegory it says Jacob didn't kill the serpent, he prevailed over it. There is nothing wrong with human desire, providing it doesn't go contrary to God's desire. Human desire, if directed by him, furnishes the steam that drives us forward to accomplish worthwhile goals. It is simply a redirection of our energies to fulfill God's plans and purposes in our life. This is a harmonizing process that brings about a balance in all factors of our being, spirit, soul, and body. It is the healing balm that makes us whole again. It reconciles us to accepting God's will instead of our own. It helps us to live a more useful and happier life here and now. It teaches us that we don't have to wait until some far-off time to re-enter the New Jerusalem, the city of peace. Like the eagle on the prince's solar plexus, our mind soars ever higher into the sunlight of God's love and wisdom, and we become conscious of the eternal now. We become Israel, the prince, and forget Jacob, the dictator. And as Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Genesis chapter 32, verses 30 through 32. When the sinew of self-will that rests in the hollow of the thigh of self-love shrinks in every prodigal after he has seen God face to face, he gorges himself less and less on the passion fruit of his own selfish desires. For divine love, like the sun, lifts him ever higher in his daily life. Arcanum 4 also finds expression in the book of Revelation. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I receive of my Father. And I will give him the morning star. Revelations chapter 2, verses 26 through 28. This text has often been cited as prophesizing the return of Christ to earth to rule the nations in righteousness with a rod of iron. If he were to return to earth, why should he change his methods? He completely disavowed the use of physical force in his first advent. If he can't win men with love to his way of life, what good would it be if he coerced them into it against their will? We would then be his unwilling slaves, and the world would be turned into one vast concentration camp. The first phrase in Revelations chapter 2, verse 26 gives the clue as to what this is all about. It says, "As he that overcometh." The message is to each individual overcomer, not about Christ or those who expect to rule with him in the millennium because they have shouted his name the loudest in their zeal to save souls. It is spoken to each and every Jacob who has become Israel. It is meant for the supplanter, now a prince who rules with God. It is meant to apply to those who, with God's help, rule their own lives wisely, not the sovereign states that make up the earth's commonwealth of nations. Another text from Revelation brings out the same aspect of Arcanum 4. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Revelation chapter 12, verse 5. And she brought forth a man-child refers to the fruit of the divine soul, Arcanum 3. As that child grows in grace and truth into the full stature of a man in Christ Jesus, it does verily rule our own individual nations with a rod of iron, or disciplined desire. Iron is the symbol of determination, and the rod is the symbol of rulership. When we determine, therefore, to permit our lives to be ruled by God's power and authority, and not our own, He brings under ever firmer control the nation of our spirit, the nation of our soul, and the nation of our body. It has been truly said that he who conquers himself is greater than he who takes a city. Most of us have ideas of how the world can be better ruled. Some even have definite plans. If only I were president, I'd do so and so. To be sure, the world can be ruled better. It can be changed. And the best place to begin is in our own life. The key word for Arcanum 4 is realization. When we lift our wand upward to the stars, the source of light and truth, when we consign our self-willed desire to the oblivion of forgetfulness, when we see through the mental darkness with the inner eye single, when, like Israel the prince, we die to self and thus realize victory over ourselves, even in a small way, the world will learn more by our example than by our precept how to walk the way of life that leads along the royal road to the New Jerusalem, symbolized by the cube in Arcanum 4. The cube is a solid denoting great strength and durability. When man gives the fourfold world of time, the third dimension of spirit, he brings into play the power of God and his eternal realm. From that realm springs all life, all truth, all love. Therefore, when we, like the prince in Arcanum 4, seat ourselves on the solid base of eternal principles that never change, we rest our lives on the sure foundation of God's limitless power, from which no passing events in the realm of time can shake us. Aphorism. Remember then, son of earth, that nothing can resist your determination to reach your spiritual goal if you but rely upon the Father of lights. With the help of his Spirit, you shall rule your own nations of spirit, soul, and body. Keywords in correspondence. Arcanum 4. Refer to page 56 in The Royal Road,